Okay. Yeah.
Hi, Steve. Oh, I can't hear you at all.
That's because I'm on mute. Hi.
Okay. I'm having Wi-Fi problems, so I'm actually on my phone.
Okay.
Trying to, if I call in again, it's because I'm trying to join via a much larger screen on my laptop.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Got you. So I'm going to try to share my screen. I still can't share my screen, Jeff. Okay, thank you.
Hey, Steve, I noticed a lot of people have their cameras off. Should we have our cameras off or on?
You can have it on.
Okay, I just didn't know which was better. I'm fine either way.
Okay. Can you guys see the presentation?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it says the host shut my video off.
Okay.
Got up and left for a minute and he shut it off.
You sure you can't turn it back on, Dave?
Yeah, I've tried.
Okay. Interesting. That's Jeff can fix that.
Says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Ask Jeff if ours should be on or off, like just to hear our voice and not.
There.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, can you guys see me?
Yeah.
Okay. I can't get it to work on my laptop, so I'm using my phone and it won't let me see everything.
That's the same thing Catherine said.
I've got the same problem. I'm working on mine. Got an
If you're
Wi-Fi.
on your phone, if you swipe right, you can see everybody's faces. You just have to keep swiping right.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
I might be able to get in here.
Okay. Well, it's 6:30. I just want to start by saying good evening to everyone. I know we have our Master Facilities Committee on Zoom with us and some of our board members on Zoom with us. And tonight, we're going to do a presentation on our Master Facilities Committee's recommendations for Phase 2. And so we'll get started. Right now, we know we have community members joining us on YouTube. So if you have a question on YouTube that you want to ask, please just type it in the YouTube chat, and we'll do our best to answer it. And if we can't answer it tonight, we'll certainly get back to you, and we will be developing a frequently asked question list so that we can continue to communicate about our recommendations tonight. So I'm going to hit present on our slide deck, and we'll get started. So welcome everybody to our Master Facilities Committee's presentation of our recommendations for Phase 2 of our Master Facilities Plan. So it's just taking a second to load here. There we are. So we have this meeting tonight, and then on the 11th, we'll be doing another live meeting, and these meetings will be recorded so that the community can see them. And what we hope is that word of mouth communication will happen in the community, and word will spread that way, but we'll also be offering some virtual coffees to folks to ask further questions, maybe learn about the plan if they haven't seen this presentation. So we'll get started. So I'm very proud to just introduce our Master Facilities Committee. They've been a great committee, a great team, really care a lot about our district. And so we have Ryan Callahan, who's a teacher and a parent in our district, and had a daughter graduate last year. Tracy Clay's kids went here, and she's a teacher at Middle School West. Kara Coates has twins that'll be seniors next year. And then she's also a marketing executive at Ohio Health. And then Jared Dominic is a sales rep. Chris Griecar is a parent, and as is Jared. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. And works in commercial construction management. Alicia Holloway is a parent and also works in commercial construction. And then Catherine Hope Cunningham is a parent and former teacher, also a realtor in our community. Marcus Harris is a healthcare therapist. Jan Zelzi is a grandparent of a graduate this year and also an engineer. David Prater has a graduate this year, and he's also a local architect. And we have our principal, Jessica Williams, and she's our high school principal at Lincoln High School. And we have Aaron Winter, who used to be principal at Middle School West and now works in our business office. And then Scott Lofton, our director of business, and assistant superintendent, Joe Elliott. And I'm Steve Barrett. So I want to give our committee members a chance to say hello. You want to start, Tracy?
Sure. Hi, I'm Tracy Clay, and I have been on this committee for over 5 years. I'm married, and I have lived in Gahanna for 35 years plus, and had 2 kids that graduated from Gahanna High School and went through the Gahanna school system, and they graduated in 08 and 09. So welcome.
Okay. Thanks, Tracy. David, would you like to say something?
Hello, Dave Prater. I have a 2017 and a 2020 graduate from Gahanna, architect that basically we do senior living. So master planning is something we're hugely familiar with. Helped with the band, scouts, and community theater around here. So that's what I bring.
All right. Thanks, David. Hi, Kara. Would you like to say hello?
Yes. Hi.
I've been probably one of the newest members on the committee. Back in November, I think, is when I first joined the committee. Wanted to give back to my community, and I've been super impressed with the talent that's been part of it. And it's just been really an honor to serve on this committee with everyone.
Thanks, Kara. Jared, are you here tonight?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Jared.
Hi. Yep, Jared Dominack here. I am a parent of two boys in elementary, and actually, I'm sorry, an elementary and a middle school boy at South and at Lincoln. And my wife is also a Spanish teacher at 8th grade at Lincoln at the middle school South. In any case, I am also a member of this committee for 4 years, and I do enjoy working with the team. Everybody has very intelligent things to contribute, so I think it's been a fantastic voyage so far.
Thanks, Jared. Catherine Hope Cunningham.
Yes, hi, everybody. I've been on the committee for about 5 years now. Parent at Middle School West. I have a 6th grader there. And before I was a realtor, I spent 16 years in education, 8 of which were as a K-12 music teacher, and 8 of which were doing admissions for Ohio State University and the College of Arts. So I'm here as a parent and a former teacher and an arts advocate.
All right. Thank you. Marcus, I'm not sure Marcus Harris was able to join us tonight. I think his work schedule just changed, so he may try to join us on Thursday. Jan Jelzy, are you here tonight?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Jan.
Okay. I'm probably one of the older ones on the committee. I've been living in the Gahanna area for 49 years. Had 4 children graduate from Gahanna and 3 grandchildren graduate from Gahanna. I've been on the committee about 6-7 months, and I'm also very impressed by the people that are serving on the committee, the wide variety of expertise that the people bring, and the insight that's been provided, and looking forward to bringing all of this to a good conclusion.
Thank you, Jan. So Aaron Winter will join us on Thursday, and also joining us tonight is Scott Lofton and Jill Elliott. Scott, do you want to say hello?
Hi, Scott Lofton. I'm the business director for the district and have been with the district for 4 years.
Okay, thanks, Scott. And hi, Jill. You want to say hello?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm the assistant superintendent, Jill Elliott. It's been a pleasure to work with this talented group of individuals on the Master Facilities Planning Committee the last few years, and we're excited about the presentation this evening.
And also Chris Griecar. Thanks, Jill. Chris Griecar is here tonight. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. So again, Chris Griecar. I have 2 kids in the district, a 4th grader and a 5th grader at Black Lake Elementary. My wife teaches at Middle School East, and I also coach boys volleyball at the high school. Been on this committee for 5 years or so as well.
Okay, thanks, everyone. So this committee's been going on a long time, even before I started in the district in 2016. So what we tried to do in 2016 is just pick up where the committee left off and continue the engagement that took place. And so we have some folks that have been here the whole time I've been here and even before. And so all of them have provided us guiding light to develop a plan for our community to address our enrollment needs and our facilities needs sort of long-term. And so we're excited to bring you our recommendations tonight. So this document may look familiar to some of you. We are in the midst of phase 1 of our master facilities plan. And in phase 1, we passed a bond issue in 2018 to build a new Lincoln Elementary on Helmbright right next to Middle School South. We're building it to house 750 students, which will help us in the short term deal with our capacity issues at the middle school level. Our Middle School South and Middle School West are burgeoning at the seams. We did redistrict to bring more students to Middle School East, which at the time only had about 450 students, and now it's well over 500, and that's redistricting has worked, and it's balancing out our population quite a bit. And then also part of phase one was to renovate all classrooms, media centers, and student restrooms. And so we're in the midst of that. Scott Lofton and his team working really hard on that. So new furniture, flooring, lighting, the LED lighting has been amazing, and that's going to save us a great deal of money long term. And then the last part of phase one is to engage our community in a conversation around Lincoln High School. We know we have a very old high school with many, many additions. And one long-term staff member with about 30 years when I first got here took me on what he called the tour of the tile. And so what he did was he walked me down the aisles, the hallways, and showed me every time the tile changed, that meant it was a new addition. And so I didn't know that. I never would have figured that out. But we've had a lot of growth over the last couple of decades, and we're continuing to grow. And so we know there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm around a high school solution. And so we're going to spend some time talking about our elementary and middle school needs tonight, but also addressing Lincoln High School. And so one of the things we did in 2019 is we did an enrollment study. What we wanted to do is study our enrollment growth, a forecast of where we will be over the next coming decades. And this enrollment forecast was done by a company that's out of Hilliard. They work nationally all around the country. They're called Cooperative Strategies. And so the forecast they did for us takes us all the way to 2068. And a key marker for us is the year 2038, 39, when we look at our long-term, 2028, 29, when we look at our long-term growth. And so we'll be highlighting that to tonight as well. So we're going to answer 4 basic questions tonight. The first is, what are our facility needs across the district? And the second is, what are the recommendations from our Master Facilities Planning Committee? And the third question is, what is the cost of the committee's recommendation? And then the fourth question is, what are our next steps for this recommendation? Oh, sorry. I'm trying to. So the first question, what are our facility needs in our district? So this is a page out of our enrollment study, and it looks at 125 units a year being built. So we know there's a lot of building taking place in Jefferson Township, that it's continuing even with COVID-19. Houses are still being sold in a matter of days, bidding over asking price, and sometimes even without inspections. And so as we look at our enrollment data, the key marker is 2038, 39. That's when we sort of hit the pinnacle of our growth in all of our buildings. But one of the things that we want to help you see on this slide is that we have been growing at the K5 and 6-8 level for a long time. And so we're at capacity now at both of those levels. We're actually over capacity. And the high school, curiously enough, as big as our high school is, we have a while to get at capacity, but there are different ways where we can show you that we're definitely over capacity at our high school even right now. So here's a slide that maybe explains it just a little bit better. So right now, K5, we have enrollment of 3596. In 2038-39, we're going to hit peak enrollment at 4271, which is an increase of 675. In the middle school level, we have 1,796 students. And in that same year, 2038-39, we're going to hit 2136, which is an increase of 340 students. And then at the high school level, we're at 2260. And in that same year, 2038, 39, we're going to hit 2847. And according to our forecast, that'll be the pinnacle. That'll be the height of our growth throughout the forecast. And so that's an additional 587 students. And so when we look at this, one of the things I think it's important to see is that our capacity is, we're already at 116% capacity at the K-5 level. And that's this year. And then at the 6-8 level at 104%. And that would have been higher had we not done the redistricting of middle schools. And so you look at 2021, we go up a little bit more, we drop down, but we're going to stay above capacity for the next 8 or 9 years and beyond at the elementary level. And we really start to accelerate in that same 8 or 9 year period to 127% at the middle school level. So if you look at this slide, it looks like we don't hit capacity at the high school for a while. With the addition of Clark Hall, we retained a good amount of classroom space, and that has helped with our overcrowding. And so we definitely have enough classroom space, but I want to show you a quick video, and it'll show how we are over capacity. So some of you may have seen this. We apologize if you caught our presentations in January and February. We did show this in our community conversations. I'm going to go ahead and hit play here, and you can see how long it takes students to get from the 3rd floor of Hamilton to the 1st floor. That's my favorite part. So this is during class change. You can see our kids are pretty patient with one another. And this was made by a student in Mark Lowry's TV class, and they sped it up to 300% speed. And so this is every class change every day at Lincoln High School. So I think you guys probably watching on YouTube, and I know most of the folks joining us on Zoom tonight have seen this before, but it takes over 2 minutes to get downstairs, and then kids often have to traverse across the building to the other side of the building, like if they have a music class, for instance. And so our hallways every day when the bell rings are very congested. And so we also have crowded cafeterias that we can't fit all of our students in. We have 4 lunch periods, and it's just not feasible to have for us to feed everyone because we don't have enough space. So many of our students, our juniors and seniors, go out to lunch and have an open lunch every day. And then, so while we have enough classroom space, we don't have capacity in our hallways or cafeteria. There's 36 or so doors in the high school. It's not built for modern safety standards, and it's inefficient in terms of the electrical systems, the HVAC systems. So we'd like to be able to build in some safety and efficiencies, some cost efficiencies. And it's not really built for 21st century collaborative learning. When you think of 21st century collaborative learning, Clark Hall is actually a model. People from all over the state come and visit Clark Hall to see what collaborative learning spaces look like. And we have that at Clark Hall, but we don't have that at our high school. And one of the other things we want to address is we have heard a lot, even in our coffees in 2018, and in our community conversations, parents are very concerned with students crossing the street to get to Clark Hall. It's one of the busiest intersections in central Ohio. Students, and we also lose a lot of academic time when students have to leave the main building and walk over to Clark Hall. So it's not efficient in by any stretch of the imagination. I know Jessica Williams is with us tonight. Jessica, did you want to say anything about capacity at the high school or crossing the street to Clark Hall?
Absolutely. As we heard in our community conversations from earlier this year, you know, the concern with students crossing the street was a concern that came up. Obviously, in the winter months, it's darker earlier and stays darker in the morning times when they're crossing for first and second period. The amount of students that cross at one time is always a concern. And then within our hallways, as you see in the video, that's in every aspect of our building, regardless of whether there's a stairwell or not. Even in some of our buildings that are just one floor, we see crowded hallways and talk about, you know, COVID-19 and mass gathering. As you can see in that video, that is one major mass gathering at that stairwell there. So allowing kids the opportunity to spread out and multiple avenues to get to class creates a greater sense of safety and efficiency in getting through the building. And, you know, the other things that we think about with our building when it comes to safety and efficiency is also our after hours usage of the building, whether it be for our athletics programs or the community using the space, making sure that our spaces are suitable for those using them, and then also that we have space for our community to use it, as well as our athletes and clubs to use those things after hours.
Okay. And Jessica, there's also some lost time because many of the classes at Clark Hall are block schedules. So there's some inefficiencies built in our schedule, right?
Absolutely. You know, you have kids who, you know, a portion of their schedule may be blocked off. So they have a greater travel time to and from main campus to Clark Hall, which could be used for instructional time. The same is true for our lunch periods because of the overcrowding in the lunch periods. We have to clear the lunch period 12 minutes a little bit early, so that way it can be cleaned and turned over for the next group. And again, that's instructional time that can be used in the classroom. So those are some of the things that we're looking forward to, gaining that instructional time back when it comes to crossing the street or having to clean the lunchroom in between periods. Being able to gain those back by having spaces that can better accommodate the amount of students that we have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Jessica.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Our recommendations from the Master Facilities Committee is really to address the concerns we've addressed with capacity, overcrowding, and efficiencies. And so we'll go into question 2 here. What are our recommendations from the Master Facilities Planning Committee? And so as we looked at the elementary capacity levels and the growth that's taking place in Jefferson Township, the committee's recommendation is for additions to Blacklick and High Point. Those are the areas in our community where the growth is taking place. A lot of the neighborhoods around High Point have changed over. You know, older residents that have retired have sold their homes and for a premium, and you know, there's a lot of young families living in and around the High Point neighborhood, and then much of the building growth is happening out toward Blacklick Elementary. So the proposal and the recommendation is to build 10 additional classrooms at each of High Point and Blacklick, new art and music rooms, and extended cafeteria space and increased office space. So there's the square footage level. So at High Point, about 22,000 square feet. Blacklick addition would be about 23,000, and then renovations at High Point of about 4,800 and 4,300 at Blacklick. So that's the elementary recommendation, and this will help us, you know, deal with long-term growth trends, create some efficiencies, and really provide us the space we need for our future. Does anybody from the committee want to say anything about this recommendation? Okay. So one thing that's interesting as architects looked at these additions is that both High Point and Blacklick are very similar. It's almost the exact same building. And so that helps with this project because there's very similar things to do in each, only slight differences. And so we think this is a cost-effective way to deal with the growth we're experiencing. And remember from the slides we showed earlier, we're already at capacity. And from the time we started in 2016 together, when I joined the district, one of the important things for the committee was that we maintain neighborhood schools, that we allow kids to go to school with kids and play in their neighborhoods with the kids they're going to school with. So we don't do a whole lot of busing across district. And so maintaining neighborhoods and neighborhood schools was really important to the committee. So the benefits of these additions would be to get rid of the trailers throughout the district. We have them at High Point, Blacklick, and Goshen Lane. So they're a little bit of an eyesore. They're very nice inside, but they're a little bit of an eyesore. We would increase space for 225 students. We'd eliminate overcrowding. You know, we would build flexible learning spaces. Anytime you build an addition, you would build it for 21st century safety and learning standards. And like I said before, it would provide us the space for our future growth. Are there any questions on the YouTube chat about these recommendations or the benefits of the recommendations?
Hey, Steve, before you take the questions, I just wanted to add that I think people might wonder, well, you're building that great big new large Lincoln Elementary. Isn't that going to help? Yes, it helps, but this is still needed based on the projections on top of a new Lincoln.
Right.
If we have the new Lincoln, we would be doing even more.
That's right. That's a very good point, Tracy. Thank you. So those capacity numbers that I showed you before take into account the new Lincoln. And that's if we don't, build these additions, we'll be hitting those capacity increases every year. Okay.
There are no questions. There are no questions just yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So here's the committee's middle school recommendations. So again, the philosophy was to maintain neighborhood schools. This recommendation is about additions and renovations to all three middle schools, East, South, and West. So it'd be 7 new classrooms at Middle School East, 10 at South, and 7 at Middle School West. Additional art and music classrooms, extended cafeteria space, and additional education spaces, and increased office space. And I won't read it here, but there's the square footage numbers at the bottom. A little bit bigger addition at East, and then very similar additions at West and South, and also some very similar square footage numbers for the renovation part of the project. And the benefits are very similar to what we talked about with the elementary school. We'd be building these additions to house an extra 175 students. And again, we would eliminate the overcrowding, create, flexible 21st century learning spaces. We'd increase our cafeteria space, and we would obviously use 21st century safety standards as we did these additions. And it just helps us provide for future growth with the increased housing that's going in Jefferson Township. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Lincoln High School recommendations and all the things that we considered, both in our community conversations and in our committee. So when we first started Coffees in leading up to the levy of May of 2018, we went out the first 7 or 8 coffees with a 3-phase plan that basically replaced Lincoln Elementary, built space for preschool, and then phase 2 would have been the additions to High Point, Blacklick, and our middle schools, and then phase 3 would have been addressing the high school. And what we heard from folks is, we want you to address the high school sooner. So we went back, we met with the committee, and we took the 3-phase plan and we adjusted it and created a 2-phase plan. And so we considered going back to that because the expense of this project is it's going to be an expensive project to do all 3 levels based on our enrollment growth. And so the other thing we looked at is the impact of 1 high school campus versus 2 campuses. We looked at saving parts, renovating parts of the high school. And then we also looked at community engagement and input that we had in January and February. So here is the 3-phase plan that I already mentioned. And because of the cost of this project, we actually, in one of our committee meetings, revisited going back to a 3-phase plan. And so we had great, robust discussions around this. And does anybody want to address those discussions? I think Chris Griecar, you had some cogent things to say about this in one of our meetings.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Thanks, Steve. So as a committee, we are mindful of the impact on the taxpayers. And this is a large master plan and a significant ask. So we did revisit the option to return to a 3-phase approach with the idea of balancing the financial burden across all 3 phases. As the elementary schools and the middle school overcrowding needs to be addressed now, that would mean that the high school solution would be deferred to that 3rd phase. However, the public feedback has been clear and consistent that there is energy and passion around supporting addressing the high school sooner. The high school is also the most expensive component of this plan, and deferring it only adds 3 to 5 years of inflation onto that already expensive ask. We also recognize that there's a real risk of levy fatigue if we subject the community to an ongoing cycle of levies to implement this plan to address the entire district in terms of our need. So after some really good discussion with the committee, we landed on this recommendation to stay with a 2-phase approach to address the master plan.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. But it was a good discussion because we were really considering costs. And originally, when we developed all 3 of these phases, it was about $40 million a piece, but that was only to renovate the high school. And that's a project that wouldn't have solved the major problems. So thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. So when we look at our high school, a lot of folks, and we talked about this in our community conversation, but a lot of folks think that in our community think that we have the biggest high school in the state. And we're definitely in the top 10. But actually, when you look at these numbers, we're 9th in the state right now. But if you look at number 15, 18, and 25, 27, and 30, all of these schools, all the way down to Westerville and Pickerington, they're all in the OCC. They're all in our athletic conference. And so when we look at this, these schools are very close to us in size. Like Hilliard has 3 high schools, Olentangy has 4 high schools, Dublin has 3 high schools. And so when you look at this, and Upper Arlington has 1, when you look at this, we're in the mix in terms of our size right now. And we're not really close in terms of numbers to the biggest high school in the state. We will grow to 2,800 students, but right now at 2,260, we're in the mix of a lot of high schools very near to us. And so as we look at this, one of the things that we considered was the renovation consideration. So what, we know we have a great theater. We know that the sky space and the wing space is something most high schools wish they had. And so what we tried to do was take the newer parts of the newer additions of Lincoln High School and see, could we renovate them? Could we save them? It's about, in today's numbers, about $200 a square foot to renovate versus well over $350 to build new. And so we thought, this was a really important thing to do, is to see how much could we renovate. And so Tracy Clay, I think you spoke to this as we went through this process of renovation versus new. I think you had sort of an epiphany of sorts when we talked about this.
Yeah, I am always the one on the committee that's like, should we go back to 3 phases? We need to renovate, not build new, because it's going to save money. And it probably comes from being married to an accountant. But everybody on this committee lives in Gahanna. So what we are recommending tonight, when it's all said and done, is a big ask, but we all will have to accept that too. Like, our taxes will go up just as anybody else's. And so when I sit on this committee, sometimes I just have heart palpitations, because I think, oh my gosh, there's got to be a way to do this that saves money for everything, not just the high school, but the elementary schools, the middle schools, everything. So we worked really hard to do a renovation instead of a new build. And when we started, I really liked how it looked. Like, we weren't renovating much of it. A lot of it we were going to be able to do new, or I'm sorry, the opposite. We were renovating a lot of it, but it just was a really good plan. And then we put numbers to it. And there was no way our first plan was going to fit within the budget. So then you have to start, like, and Jessica was part of this, like, you have to start going, okay, what part can we throw in now? And okay, what part can we throw in now? And this is what you're looking at, is what we had to come up with to fit within our budget. And it was, I'll never forget that meeting. We've been meeting every Monday night, and I'll never forget walking away from that meeting for the first time, like, totally deflated. Lots of meetings you're walking away deflated, but totally deflated. Like, this is still a big ask, and we're renovating, and the community's never going to get behind it. This is not anything to be excited about. And so the next week we came back, and then you'll see why we moved on to building a new one, and how the cost comparison really wasn't as different as I thought it was going to be. But this renovation, I really wanted it to work. I really, really did, because I thought it was going to save the community money. The levy wouldn't be as much. But once we realized what we had to renovate, it was not exciting. Like, we were keeping a lot of stuff that we didn't really want to keep, that was super old. So thanks for letting me say that.
Thank you, Tracy. I think one of the things we were keeping, besides a lot of old parts of the building, we were keeping our problems. We were keeping our problems with hallway capacity, traversing from one side of the building to the other. And we weren't really solving the major problems logistically with our high school. So it actually became 2/3 renovation, 1/3 new. It still
and
would
I
have
remember even saying, because I don't know anything about construction, so I would even say, like, well, can't we just make the stairwells bigger? They're on the corners. Can't you just break out the corner of the building and make them bigger? Can't you make the hallways bigger? Like, can't we make this work? And there's just no way without it looking the way it looks in front of you right now.
Yeah. So yeah, what you see in blue is everything we would have kept, and even the part where that video was shown, we would have kept that. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it was a deflating meeting. We had conversations with one another, almost like therapy sessions. We got to do better, and this is not something we feel inspired about. And so, how can our community feel inspired about it? So
another thing, Steve, was the logistics. How do you renovate and still have school?
Right.
And if you can't do enough work in the summer, 10 weeks to do the renovation.
It would have taken a long time, right, Jan? Jan works in
Right.
engineering and construction, and it would have taken an awful long time, and it would have been messy. Lincoln High School has gone through a lot of renovations. They've lived through it. I've seen some yearbooks when the auditorium was built and kids walked to Hamilton Road to get to their next class. It can be done, but it's not smooth. It's not pretty. And in this case, we'd have been, holding on to problems that we want to solve. So, okay, we'll move on. And so we had community conversations, and one of the things in these community conversations that was said is, how much of the old building can you save to cut down on costs? Because we did talk in these meetings about our debt limit, which is about $205 million. And, we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go further into the presentation. But I think one of the things about our community conversations is there was a lot of energy in the room. We had 4 sessions, about 240 participants over 4 nights. It was a group brainstorm, so people were able to kind of express their ideas at their tables and groups, and then they mixed within the larger group, and then we had proposals with benefits column, like a T-chart, and a trade-off column. And so we had some rich discussions around that and created some flip charts and processed what folks who came to those meetings were feeling, and most really wanted to address the high school. They understood, we did talk about our growth at the elementary and middle school, but they were there to address Lincoln High School. And so we will move on to the next slide here. So some major themes in our community meetings are as follows. So what we heard is build one new high school on the current site. And people talked about, can we do that and have school? And so they talked about a phase approach and, really trying to help us figure out how can we do this and still have school? And we definitely can. We heard to design a state-of-the-art campus style structure designed for 21st century. So think of 21st century learning, think of Clark Hall. Also include excellent performing arts and athletic spaces with an athletic field house. Also incorporate more vocational learning options on our high school site. This was an interesting point that we didn't expect to hear necessarily. We have wonderful programs that are Eastland Fairfield programs at Clark Hall, so architecture, teaching professions, and bioscience. But we know there's a shortage of lots of things in terms of workforce development, and we heard a lot of conversation around things like construction science and other things that community members felt that they wanted their kids exposed to, and knowing that their kids didn't want to get on a bus, travel a half hour to go to Eastland Fairfield to do welding or cosmetology or whatever. So they really wanted us to consider more vocational options, and also integrating some security enhancements. We heard a lot about that. We heard a lot about, not wanting kids to walk across the street to Clark Hall. And so a part of this recommendation that we're going to announce tonight is eliminating the walk across the street to Clark Hall. So I want to show this slide. We've already shown it, our capacity numbers. And so we've shown you as soon as the bell rings, we're over capacity at Lincoln High School. But if you look at this, if we built a new high school on the current site, so, we have space that'll, once we tear down Lincoln Elementary, we have the practice fields, we have where I'm sitting now in the board office, there is room to do all that work. And even though we have enough classroom space, it looks like for the next several years, when you think about it, if you put a bond issue on in fall of 2020, it would probably take a good 48 months to build a new building, so 4 years. And so by the time it was finished, we'd be pretty much at capacity. And so what we're talking about is this growth is here. It's gonna, get here. Not even, I used to say gradually and suddenly. It's going to be pretty sudden, pretty soon, and it's important that we address it. So here's a nice shot of Lincoln High School, the stadium, and the City Hall in Gahanna behind it. And so what the recommendation for the high school is from the committee is to build a new high school on the current site for an additional 600 students or 2,800 students total. And so if we have permission to do this, here's what we'd be able to do. We'd be able to have a 400,000 square foot high school on a single site, state-of-the-art performing arts. We have well-known throughout the state and in particular in Central Ohio, orchestra, band, performing arts, choir, that is second to none, and providing state-of-the-art spaces for those performances would be a wonderful thing. Also an athletics center with a field house, expanded cafeteria space so we could actually feed all of our students and they wouldn't have to go out and buy lunch every day, which gets expensive. And then additional vocational training and approximately 130 so classrooms. We'd have to do a lot of programming work to figure out exactly what we needed, but it's in that range. And then ample parking for students. Right now, parking is a premium. And so, and the ability to have school happen for those 48 or so months while we're building. And so all of that is possible. And so I want to just talk a minute about what I've heard from parents of elementary students. So in a number of the coffees that we talked about when we felt compelled to reduce the 3-phase plan to a 2-phase plan, parents who coached and their kids played in Pee Wee basketball, they would talk about going to Dublin or Hilliard or Marysville for a game and seeing bright, fresh, new facilities that they got to play in, even in 4th and 5th and 6th grade. And so one of the things about having a single high school that's so endearing and so empowering is the high school becomes a unifying force. And the kind of campus we're talking about building wouldn't just be for 9th through 12th grade students, but we see it as a community resource where kids in 4th and 5th and 6th and 7th grade would be able to use the field house or the athletic facilities, much like they do in other communities. So we see where our high school sits geographically in the middle of our town on a very prominent corner. We see it as a unifying force, as a source of pride and a rallying point for our entire community. And that's inspiring to us. And we think it's really important to address this and do it now because we've waited a long time and costs have gone up and it's a more expensive time to build now than it was 5-10 years ago. And the longer we wait, the more expensive it will get. And so what is the cost of this recommendation? So the costs for the elementary additions at Blacklick and High Point would be close to $20 million. So just under that, $19 million. And the cost for the 3 additions at East, South, and West would be $31,000. And so by far the bulk of this recommendation, the cost will be at the high school level. So the total budget would be about $250 million, which we know is a significant amount of money. And I think, one of the things that we tried to do was all the things we talked about. We deliberated about, going back to 3 phases. We deliberated about, renovation. We don't think that's what our community is inspired or feels excited about. And this is the 250 million, we realize, is a big number. But if we have permission to do this, it will serve our district for the next 60, 70, 100 years. And it's an important thing for us to bring to our community and ask permission for. And so what is the cost for the taxpayer? So we would have to use 2 funding mechanisms, because I said before, our debt limit is about 205,000. So we'd have to take a bond levy and combine it with a PI levy, or permanent improvement levy. And the total cost on a $100,000 house would be about $19 per month, or $226 annually. The median housing price in Gahanna, the last time we checked, was about $218,000. So you would have to look at, these, home prices to figure out where you fit in this picture. And we know there's not many houses in Gahanna that are only worth $100,000. The total millage is 6.43 mils for both the bond and the PI levy. And this is the total cost of this project. And the other thing we should say here is that construction costs in Central Ohio have gone up considerably. When you look at OSU and some of the public building projects that are happening and some of the private building projects that are happening, it used to be that in Central Ohio, a good number was construction projects would go up 3 or 4% a year. Well, right before the school closure and the COVID-19 crisis, building prices were going up about 3% a quarter. One factor of that is it's not so much construction companies making more money or materials. It's what's driving that price is a shortage of labor. Trying to find the right number of people to build is a really difficult thing. I know on our Lincoln Elementary project, Cornica-Cosing was only able to find 1 bidder on the electrical requirements or the electrical construction of Lincoln Elementary. And so there's lots and lots of work and a big demand for labor, and therefore the price goes up. So what are the next steps that we're going to look at with this recommendation? Before I get to next step, are there any questions on YouTube that we can try to answer at this time?
Yes, Mr. Barrett. So there's one question from Belinda Contreras, and she's asking, could you please discuss the addition of auditoriums at Middle School East and Middle School South?
Yeah, so one of the things that the committee looked at was, could we add auditoriums at East and South? And we could, but when we looked at the cost of the overall project and our enrollment needs, it was something that we considered and wanted to do, but we're not sure that the cost would be something we could sustain at this time. And when we looked at the use of Middle School West Auditorium, certainly during May and December, it gets used a lot, but it wasn't in play in terms of use as much as we thought. And we did a little analysis of that. We looked at the auditoriums, and it was a tough decision to make. But in terms of affordability, in the larger scope of things, we would like to do the additions at South and East so that we could eventually build auditoriums. And if maybe the pricing of building in Central Ohio goes down, we might be able to, in this project, find a way to figure out to afford it. But at current trends, it was not something that we thought we could do within our debt limit and within the full scope of the project. And I know some folks may feel disappointed about that. We really wanted to try to do that, but you know, much as we tried, it was too difficult a hill to climb for the auditoriums at South and East. Does anybody on the committee want to say anything about that?
Hi, Steve. It's Jared.
Hey, Jared.
Yeah, I think absolutely. You hit it right on the head. We looked at that extensively. It was a part of the wish list when we came to the reality of what the numbers are, and we decided that renovating 60% of a very aged old high school wasn't the ideal situation and didn't solve many of the problems that we were facing. I think we realized quickly that while these are nice, they weren't a necessity at the moment. But what we did plan and we structured in our plans was to build the campuses such that there's a space for them in the future if we do have a need or if we do have the funding and support for it. So they were considered strongly. And, you know, like Steve said, they're not off the table. If the dynamics of the economy change and money is available, it could be something put back in, but it is right now it's on the side.
Yeah, and Steve, I also wanted to say everything, usually Scott Lofton would bring to us a spreadsheet with numbers, and every single time, well, before we took auditoriums off the table, auditoriums were in there. And then we had other wish list items that would just start, you know, flying off because of money. Auditoriums were the thing we held on to the bitter end. And it was not something that we took off lightly, because we know Middle School East and Middle School South would benefit from having their own auditoriums. But money-wise was the only reason. But every single spreadsheet we looked at, even after we took it off, it still is always in there. It's always in there with how much money it costs, just so that we are always reminded that it's there. And if we can plug it back in, we will. Like, those were the last thing off the wish list we wanted to get rid of.
Mr. Barrett, there are a few more questions from the community. So the next question is there any chance of an auditorium or pool being included in the field house?
We're so pressed to find as cost-effective way to do this full project at all three levels, elementary and middle and high school. You know, we did not look at an auditorium because we just didn't think we could afford it. And we know it's not only expensive to build, but also maintain. So one of the consequences of us waiting so long to address, I think we're one of the only suburbs I know of, certainly in our conference, that hasn't addressed a high school with a solution that's a newer build. And so I think the consequence of waiting so long is that, you know, things like auditoriums at the middle school or an auditorium really aren't possible at this time.
Thank you. The next question, when will redistricting take place for elementary schools with New Lincoln Elementary opening up in the fall of 2021?
So this fall, we plan to engage in redistricting to stem some of the capacity problems in our elementaries and shift some of the, you know, in a very mindful, thoughtful way where we will engage the community. We will start that redistricting discussion this fall. Lincoln Elementary is slated to be in play for students and teachers in the fall of 21. And it's on schedule at this point. We have been concerned about all the rain we've had this spring, but so far we're on schedule.
Thank you. And could you also please address the operations side of things?
So in terms of adding teachers or
An operating levy
oh,
component.
operating, yeah. So the operating, I'm gonna go, so we are growing. And so I know that the growth is going to cause us to, in addition to this bond and PI levy, we are going to have to combine it with an operating levy. And we don't know what the numbers are on that yet. We, in this fiscal year, which is ending this month, our budget was cut by $1.6 million, which is about 2% of our overall budget and 11% of our state funding. And we know that in FY21, which starts July 1st, we're going to be reduced again. And our treasurer, Mike Verlingo, is on the Zoom meeting with us tonight. And that we expect that to be another between 10 and 20%, probably in the middle, like 15%. We actually paused with some new hires this summer, but then we went ahead because we know we need these positions. Those cuts that happened in this fiscal year were a little bit of a surprise to us. We know the state is struggling with COVID-19 crisis, unemployment, lots and lots of costs the state is sustaining. And so they cut our budget and every other budget for school districts in the state. And we know we're going to have more cuts. So in addition to the cuts, the growth that we've talked about, we're going to have to put an operating levy on the ballot. And we have 4 fiscal beliefs that we work hard to live by. And one of those is to have 60 days cash on hand. We don't want to spend down every dollar we have. And then, have to make huge cuts because we have nothing, no carryover left. So we're going to consider that as we look at operating dollars as well. So thank you for that question.
Steve, this is Jared again. I'll chime in because I think it's important to tell the story related to the master plan as well, that even pre-COVID, we had always kept this as a primary thing in our mind, knowing that any expansion means you have new classrooms, which means more teachers. And of course, the operating budget needs to increase. That's part of also the reason we considered, should we add alternative things as, a completely new elementary? Well, that causes a challenge. Or if we build a second high school, that's also additional expense. So the whole plan considered operating. Now, we have no idea what the impact will be numbers wise, but I wanted to make sure that it was clear that from the get-go, we had that in our back of our heads as we thought this through, and we tried to be as diligent as possible.
Yeah. I think those are really good points, Jared. Thank you. Anybody else from the committee want to comment on that?
Well, Steve, as you indicated, we did receive a cut in state funding at the end of this fiscal year. Going forward, we do expect to see those cuts continue so that we're not necessarily expecting incremental losses the next year or two, but we do expect the funding to remain depressed. In addition, due to the economic environment, we did anticipate that tax collections and other revenue streams might see a negative impact. One of the good indications that came out today was that May state revenues were not down as significantly as they were in the prior month. So we're starting to see maybe a bit of a rebound in state tax collections for both income tax and for sales tax. So that is a good sign in that maybe we will recover from this virus situation faster than what might have been anticipated previously. If that occurs, then I would expect the funding to not necessarily be reinstated at the prior level, but it would not at least incur more negative impacts.
So Mike, do you want to share what your thoughts are on the FY21 cuts that are imminent?
Well, the first one was the state funding, where we, took 1.67 million hit this year. We do expect that again for fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22. Again, the hope is that maybe those cuts will, part of it would be reinstated. Other impacts relate to the collection of tax revenues and whether or not there are issues where that would be delayed, which certainly impacts at least the short-term funding. And the hope would be we'd recapture that over the next several years.
Yeah. So if we sustain the same reduction from the state that we just did in May, what would happen is we would be down 3.2 million. And then if it happened again in 21-22, it'd be more like 4.8 million, right, Mike? So
correct.
Your point about the economy reopening and maybe getting a little better, hoping that the cuts won't be as steep as that, but that could be a worst case scenario for us. And so, any other questions, Jill?
Yeah, so far there are 4 more. The next one is, did the committee talk about the lack of opportunity for students in athletics, music, etc., when you have 1 high school compared to 2? By only having 1 team, you're eliminating a good portion of kids and their ability to have ownership and pride in their school by participating on a sports team.
Yes, we have discussed that, and it did come up in our community meetings. We think there's a lot of opportunities for students at Lincoln High School to find a niche, whether it's in performing arts, athletics, all the clubs that we have, but that is a concern. When we look at the notion of building a second high school, in order, to maybe expand some of those opportunities. And, when parents have contacted me about wanting to add a second high school, it's usually been around athletics. So to the point of the question here, I've gotten several calls about that in my tenure here. I think when we look at the operational costs, Steve Vasic, who was an interim treasurer just before Mike, ran some numbers, and it was slightly over $1 million to add staffing to the second high school. And those are operational costs that would occur yearly. We could shift some of the staff from Lincoln High School to a new facility. But when you look at the long-term operational costs, it would be very expensive. But perhaps the most, I think, important reason to look at maintaining 1 high school, and we heard from our community pretty strongly in our community conversations that the folks that were at these meetings really preferred that option, is if you build a new high school, you would have to renovate the current Lincoln High School to the same standards just to have any sort of semblance of equity. And that would be a huge number to build a new high school and then renovate the current high school. And I'm not sure you could ever really get to equity with an old building. I mean, you could make it look nicer, you could renovate it, but it wouldn't be the same. And so we might be creating a situation where we would have haves and have-nots. And the other thing that would be a mitigating reason to stay, to maintain 1 high school is the fact that we have a rich panoply of diversity in our schools. We're kind of known for that, and to break that up and the richness of all the different cultures that we have here in Gahanna, the points that I made before about the high school being on one of the most prominent corners of our community and being a unifying force, a place for everyone to rally around. I think that would be giving up a lot. And that's what we've heard from our community and in community conversations. So it would be very expensive, and it would compromise equity, and it would compromise our diversity. Does anybody on our committee want to talk about that?
I wanted to say one thing. I totally understand the person asking the question, and especially for athletics. I mean, I had 2 kids go through the high school. My daughter could care less about sports, but my son did. And because we were such a large high school, he really didn't have the opportunity to play much. And so I totally understand the question and the concern there. But when you weigh it against everything Steve said, and plus the idea that if you think about, just pretend that we could just divide it in half, and you could have half go to the second high school and half go to the first high school, then you have to divide teachers and number of classes. And one of the great things about our high school that is an envy of a lot of high schools is how diverse our classes are that we can offer. Like tons of different kinds of art classes, tons of different kinds of history classes, language arts classes, English classes. All of those are because we're such a large high school. We have to have all these classes for kids to take. When you divide that in half, you can't continue to offer all of those classes. You have to start making choices. And so you would lose that, not just academics, but even the arts and those types of classes that are offered, I think is huge. Even though I know 2 high schools seems to really support athletics, there's just so many other pieces to the puzzle that it would be, we wouldn't be doing our due diligence to say 2 high schools just for athletics. There'd have to be a lot more compelling reasons for it.
I think those are really good points, Tracy. I think when you look at our high school, because it's sort of an economy of scale high school, all the points Tracy made about offering classes that are very unique that other high schools can't afford to offer or even consider, just the fact that we added American Sign Language recently. And we thought at first we were going to have to add maybe half a teacher, but it really caught on. We're up to 2 teachers now, and I think a total of 12 sections of American Sign Language. And that really came about from a student coming to our student learning and achievement meeting, talking about how she was losing her hearing and how her kids, how her friends wanted to learn American Sign Language so they could communicate with her. That was driven by a student's voice. You think about classes like, we have a World War II history class, which is not a state requirement, but we have a teacher who's really passionate, Jennifer Candor, about world history. She's taken kids on trips to Europe and to Pearl Harbor. And so when you talk about, having 4 or 5 sections of a World War II history class, just because kids are interested in it, not because it's a state requirement, it's because we have an economy of scale high school and we can afford to offer it. Our student per pupil student expenditure is just over $11,000, which is really a pretty efficient number. And one of the reasons we're able to kind of maintain our per pupil expenditure at an efficient level is because we have a large high school. So looking at equity, looking at access, looking at diversity, and looking at long-term operational costs. Not to mention, I mentioned like staffing a second high school, but then also the added buses and transportation that we would have to include, the added electrical and utility costs would be another factor. So
Steve, this is Kara. I just want to jump in real quick just to say I was that parent when I joined this committee that was like, why not have 2 high schools? And it was all of those learnings that you just mentioned, that Tracy mentioned, that it made it harder to get behind when you would see what you'd have to give up and then what we'd have to put forward financially.
mm-hmm.
Okay, next question. Any consideration from the committee that doing a bond, a PI levy, and an operating levy is just too much for the community to handle during these times?
Yes, I think, we have to be mindful of that. I mean, our needs are what they are. And, I think when we talk about next steps, we'll talk about a little bit about what we plan to do in June here. But yeah, we know that there might be some significant affordability issues with this. As a committee, our goal was to do what we said we were going to do, which is to bring forth a recommendation to our community. We've waited a long time in Gahanna for addressing a high school solution. We are growing. We're going to be burgeoning at the seams soon. And so to wait, we'll have to deal with the consequences if that's the decision we make. And so we are confident that this is the right recommendation. And we plan to put it on our board agenda for a resolution in June. But we also know that affordability might be an issue, and that families are going to have to weigh what they're able to do, what they're able to afford, and we will have to make operational reductions if we don't pass an operating levy soon. And we strongly believe that we want to give parents an opportunity to say yes or no before we make those reductions, because it'll compromise, what we do and the programs we offer. But we also know that there's reality of, unemployment due to COVID-19. And so we have to weigh all those factors, but it's a very difficult time right now in our economy. So yes, I mean, those are all considerations.
Thank you. Next question. Are you going to put the bond and PI levy together on the ballot or separate them?
The bond and the PI will be together, and it would be combined with operating. So it would be all one ask.
Next question. What happens to Clark Hall with the new high school plan?
So currently, we're looking at having Clark Hall appraised as Class A office space to see what it's worth. We do get income from Clark Hall, from Clark Commons. We get about $132,000 a year. So we've been talking with appraisers on looking at what Clark Hall is worth, both from a cost perspective, maybe as Class A office space, but also looking at the income we get. And so we should have that done relatively soon. And then, in the community meetings, participants talked about moving central office if we use the space that we're in right now for our board office. Possibly some folks suggested that we move our central office team there. But I think it's the first step is looking at an appraisal and looking at, in the real estate market, the commercial real estate market, what is Clark Hall worth? That doesn't mean that we plan to sell it. It's just having information so that we know what it's worth, and then making prudent decisions in regard to Clark Hall when we know more. We do have our preschool there, and we have our 3 Eastland Fairfield career technical courses there as well. And there's a lot of junior and senior students who take classes at Clark Hall as well.
Thank you. Next question. How will construction take place during the school year?
So it's a difficult balance. We're working with an architectural firm that is really well known in Central Ohio and across the country. They specialize and are very creative, and they specialize in tight urban spaces. And so the firm is called Moody Nolan, and I think Brent Wilcox is on our Zoom chat here. And so I don't know, Brent, you want to introduce yourself, but we've talked with them, and we can definitely fit a new structure for 400,000 square feet on this plot of land that we're on, and do so and still have school with some adjustment, some swing space, maybe the current Lincoln Elementary. We've talked about a number of things like that, but it can be done, and there are measures that we can take that will make it as that'll stem the disruption as much as we can. Hi, Brent, are you there? Did you want to just say hello?
Yeah, I can say hello, Steve. Yeah, this is Brent Wilcox. I'm with Moody Nolan. Our pleasure to start to introduce ourselves to you and understand about how your district works. I guess the question is can a facility be built on the tight site? Like Steve said, we do have a lot of urban experience with working on tight sites. Our most recent experience has been with Upper Arlington Schools, and I think you may know their site. They have a very tight site as well, where we actually kept the existing building while we built a second building on the same site and still managed all their athletic facilities. So we were able to keep everything up and functioning and try to minimize the visibility of construction as well. So, we think it's very doable, and we're really looking forward to getting into showing you what those options might be. So thank you, Steve, for introducing me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brent. So another question we got is the operational, what would be the combined amount for bond, PI, and operating? And it's going to be close to, and Mike, you can help with this. It'll be 10 mils, maybe a little bit higher. We know that the valuation numbers of our assessed value are going to be up significantly, but we just don't want anybody to leave this meeting thinking that we can have operating and all these facility projects for just 6.43. It's going to be more than that with operating. We don't have a specific number, but it'll be close to 10 mils total, if not just a little more. So Mike, I'm pretty sure you're not ready to talk about that, but if you want to add anything to that.
Oh, it's partly dependent upon assumptions that we will look at here in the next week or so to decide what impact they have on the forecast. The forecast we filed showed a levy request of 4.65 initially. That will come down based upon the projected increases in funding for values that we're seeing from the county auditor. Those numbers are not yet finalized, so we can't necessarily say we know exactly what the impact would be, but we can somewhat quantify it. But the levy request would decrease. And then depending upon some assumptions we might be able to make or potential cuts that we can anticipate, it may get reduced more. So I think your comment of being in the 10 mil range is appropriate at this time.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions?
One more at this time. The question is, what is the committee's reason for not separating the issues? The community just passed a levy in May 2018, and now you're going back for a huge ask.
So separating operating with building, I think is the question. I think the short answer to that is we need both. And the longer we wait for facility needs, the more expensive it'll get. If we wait for operating, we'll have to make reductions that will be difficult. And so it is big. I think one of the things that, when we passed the operating levy in 2018 with the bond, we had been off the ballot for operating for 7 years. And so I think that when you look at the overall millage, the effective millage that Gahanna residents pay compared to other districts and effective millage, we were toward the bottom of Franklin County. And so, one unfortunate thing to all this is that we've waited a long time to address facilities. We also stayed off the ballot a long time to address operating needs. And it is difficult to do the things we want to do and the things we need to do for our students when you have effective millage that lags behind Hilliard, Dublin, Olentangy, and others. And so at the end of the day, our effective millage is much lower than many of the districts we compare ourselves to. So we get that it is an issue. And the beauty of democracy when you vote for or don't vote for a school levy is you have a right to choose. You have a right to give us permission or not. I think our commitment is to do a very deliberative process like we've done with this committee, to ask ourselves tough questions. We know affordability could be an issue, but at the end of the day, it's really asking our community for permission. And if the community says no, maybe because the community or individuals in the community can't afford it, we will adjust accordingly. But at the end of the day, we have these needs to maintain the kind of instruction that we would like to maintain, and we need permission to go ahead with that. If we don't get that, then we will have to make appropriate reductions and still try to offer the most robust education we can for the dollars that we have. There's a lot of things that have happened sort of all at once with COVID-19. And it's really difficult and it's really unfortunate. But, and so we understand that. And so we understand that families will have to make choices, and affordability could be an issue.
Steve, I wanted to say, we made this recommendation not because we think that it's going to be easy for families to afford. Unfortunately, we are at the point that we just wait so long that we're not asking for money for fun things. I know it sounds like it when we're saying, 21st century learning, those kinds of things, but the point is we're overcrowded in our elementary schools, we're overcrowded in our middle schools already. The high school isn't showing it with numbers, but it's showing it with bodies and hallways. And when I first got on this committee years ago, they showed us this graph about the schools around us. And they showed the money that the schools around us spent on buildings. And then I think they called it instruction, the money that the schools around us spent on instruction. But it was basically like professional development or curriculum, those types of things. And I was shocked that everybody around us, I shouldn't have been because they were all building buildings at the time, but I was shocked that all of their money was like buildings were way up here, but they hadn't spent on the curriculum. And Gahanna was the flip. We had not taken care of buildings, but we had done a lot of professional development, spent a lot of money on making sure the kids have the best programs in education. And now we're at this point that it's a huge, huge ask, but I don't know where else we go. And Steve's right. If we don't get permission from the community to move forward with this, because this is a recommendation, it's not our decision, it's the community's decision. If we don't get that, if it is not decided to go through with it, you're still going to have the same teachers we have right now. I mean, we'll probably have to cut some, but teachers are always going to do a good job in Gahanna with what they have. They're always going to do their best. But it's just a shame that we've got to ask a big ask. This would be a big ask without COVID. We knew that. We're not pretending like COVID is what makes it a big ask. It's a big number. But unfortunately, we let our buildings get to this place, and now we have to fix them.
Yeah, I would also say that we've, when we look at our teacher salary schedule, we're challenged as well. Teachers in our conference in other districts in terms of starting salary and over a 30-year career are outdistancing us a little bit at this time. And so recruitment is still good in Gahanna. We still get teachers, lots of teachers applying that want to work here, but over time we've lagged in that area as well. So I would say the theme is we've deferred maintenance on our buildings, we've deferred building for growth, we've deferred a lot of things in terms of our teacher salary schedule, and it's really important that we address all of these things and ask for the community's help. But again, we understand that people have to make choices, and those choices are sometimes difficult.
Right. Yeah, and I think just to add one more point is, we want to build to our needs. We're not trying to exceed and build something that's beyond our needs. But instruction is the primary goal for the committee. We've always kept that front and center, and having an operational budget that allows us to staff the buildings that we build is key to that. So I think the two things have to come together. You can't build a beautiful building and have, classrooms that are empty.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Jared. There are communities where that has happened, where you build a new building and then the operating piece lags behind, and you can't actually move in to the new building. So
I believe that was Dublin, wasn't it? Did something like that happen?
Yeah, it might have. I'm not sure if it was Dublin. Might have been before my time, but I mean, it has happened. Any other questions, Jill?
Yes, a couple more.
Okay.
How much is the field house going to cost? Also, what exactly is being set aside for music programs?
So we have one of the best student teacher ratios that I have seen in my career in music education. We really fund that at a high level. So I think our commitment to the arts is very, very strong. So we don't plan to make any reductions unless we have to our music program or our performing arts program. So, part of this plan is to build a state-of-the-art performing arts center. Part of this plan is to build a state-of-the-art facility for athletics. We don't have exact numbers yet on what the field house would cost or what the performing arts center would cost. We have square footage costs, and it's around $350 or so a square foot. And those are big spaces. But sometimes, when you look at a field house, it's not as expensive to build because it's a big space with, 4 walls and a foundation, and not lots of finish work inside. So, but, when we think about a field house, in Hilliard and Dublin, Olentangy, they have field houses, and their whole community uses those field houses, even elementary kids. And so that is one of the things we envision with the field house here. I mean, I think if you put a field house in Gahanna, it would be used morning, noon, and night. It would be inspiring for our families and our community. And the way we look at our schools is their community resources, their community assets that don't belong to the schools, they belong to the community. And so we would open those up to not just 9 through 12, but the entire community.
Thank you. The next question says, the district is thinking the operational levy will be around 10 mils. What does that equate to a month per $100,000 value of a home? I know every district is different.
So the operational wouldn't be 10 mils. The combined would be 10 mils or just above. So bond, PI plus operating could be 10 or just a little bit more than 10. Mike has some, Verlingo, our treasurer, has some more work to do on that. So we don't have the number on the operating part of that, but we will have that soon as Mike works through what's happening with the county auditor what's happening with the reductions from the state. We should know that very soon. But it would be more, obviously, than $19 a month, per 100,000.
That is all the questions at this time.
Okay. So what are our next steps? So I think, next steps are to do a same live meeting that we did tonight on Thursday. So if you're watching on YouTube and you can tell your friends, neighbors, family members that live in our community, we'll be live to answer questions. We're going to record these sessions so people can listen to them. We do plan to make a recommendation to proceed on June 18th, which will require 2 resolutions. And we plan to do coffees again, like we did in 2018. These would be virtual. The host would invite family members, friends, neighbors, and we would be on a Google Meet with 10, 15, 20 people, and we'd be discussing phase 2 of the plan, operation costs, and we plan to do that. Now, this is a recommendation. It will go before the board on June 18th, and it's basically resolution of necessity and a request for funds in June. And then there are several steps that need to take place in July. And then Mike Verlingo, our treasurer, would need to take it to the Board of Elections sometime in August. And so we plan to have lots of conversations. And so you can consider, if possible, to do a coffee, and your only job in the coffee is to get people to show up. And the nice thing about virtual coffees, much better in person, but the nice thing about virtual ones is you don't have to clean your house or vacuum or any of that. You can just invite friends to be a part of the chat. We love doing coffees, and we haven't done any virtual ones, so we don't know exactly how they'll work, but we'd love to get started in having conversations, and we need the community's help to organize those. The plan would be to put the issue on the November 3rd, 2020 ballot. Any questions about any of that?
No.
Okay. So we feel like we've waited a long time in Gahanna to address a high school solution, and we feel like it's time. And we also know that there's mitigating factors of affordability, but I think the longer we wait, the more expensive it will be. We think this is important for us to ask for permission from our community, and we're excited to have further conversations about it. And so we really want to thank everybody for joining us on YouTube tonight. And please let your friends, neighbors, family that live in our community know about our meeting on Thursday night. And we'll stay on and answer any more questions you might have. I just want to thank everybody for being here tonight. We can wait a couple minutes for questions.
Steve, while we're waiting for questions, I'd like to go back and address Susie, one of Susie's questions about the committee's reason for not separating the issues. One of the things that we have to consider we're all Gahanna residents, and it all affects us the same. And we have to consider cost to the community. But I've been on this committee for 5 years now, and one of the advantages of that is I've been able to see, with all the number crunching that we do, the cost per square foot escalate and escalate and escalate. And especially in the last year, that's been a huge consideration. And so when you start to crunch the numbers about, cost to do it now versus cost to do it later, it becomes a concern. And so we absolutely considered, we had everything on the table, and it was, a lot of these meetings are about number crunching, people in classrooms, and number crunching dollars, and cost to us and cost to the community, cost to the school district. And this was the best solution.
Thank you, Catherine. Before we sign off, I want to thank two of our board members. I see Burl Piccolantonio is here tonight, and Jennifer Chrysler is here. And I think Daphne Mooring and possibly Matt Campbell and Brian Harrison might be on YouTube. Hello, Jennifer. Hello, Burl. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I'd just like to thank our committee. You guys have been incredibly inspiring to work with. Your dedication to meeting every Monday night and trying to help us make tough choices that, there's not unlimited funds. And so I've really enjoyed our work together, our meetings on Mondays. And so thank you for all your hard work and dedication and helping us get to this point. So thanks so much. We really appreciate all you've done to help us bring these recommendations to our community.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, so thanks very much. We'll be here again Thursday, the 11th at 6:30 p.m. And appreciate everybody being here tonight to hear our presentation and our recommendations. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.